do sound little nasally, but nothing you can't handle. Where did I just do the book? There it is. Also, I realized the fountains are kind of loud in the last one, so I unplugged one of them. They're basically, there's 2 fish tanks, and their little filters are kind of like little waterfalls. And if I fill it up really full, it won't make noise, but I realized when I fill it up too full, it's like it doesn't take as many air bubbles to the bottom of the tank, and I realized the fish will like have to stay at the top when I do that. So if I turn it, not turn it, if I let it like be at a level where it's making a little bit of noise, I guess it just takes more air bubbles down with it, and it makes the oxygen level in the water higher. I don't freaking know. All I know is what I see. So anyways, but I turned one of them off, the one in the smaller tank, so it'll be off for a few minutes, not very long, just long enough for me to read chapter 8. And there's only a snail in there, so in the second one. There's fish in the bigger one, and the next one is just snails. Chapter 8. Oh, yes, so this is probably going to be in another video. Chapter 8 of The Eternal Ones by Kirsten Miller. Now I second guess myself. I'm going to say Kirsten, and then I'm going to be like, wait, it's probably Kristen. Oh, it's Kirsten. Although this isn't like one of the early editions that was like, the cover wasn't finished as far as I can remember. So I guess there could be a mistake. No, I'm just kidding. Her name is written in too many places. I'm going to stop yakking and start on chapter 8. Even with the town preacher as Haven's confidant, it would have been a lonely 8 years if Bo Decker hadn't shown up in the school cafeteria with a Barbie lunchbox. Back then, he was one of the popular kids, so good-looking even at that age that girls blushed and giggled when he glanced in their direction. Everyone knew that his family had fallen on hard times. His clothes were a few years out of date, patched up, hand-me-downs from older cousins. But the pink lunchbox with Barbie astride a glittering unicorn was a pristine treasure. Some of the girls watched with envy as Bo proudly opened it and pulled out a sandwich. The rest of the kids knew something was wrong, even if most of them couldn't have named it. Remarks were made. Haven even heard the word. I don't even want to say that word. Somebody called him the F-A-G-G-O-T. Someone got pushed. Then a melee of epic proportions broke out. Bo took down 3 older boys with perfectly aimed punches before a group of 7th graders overwhelmed him. Teachers dragged them off Bo, whose face was bloody and eyes wild. As the combatants were escorted to the principal office, Haven crawled through the slurry of spilled milk and trampled food to retrieve the Barbie lunchbox from underneath the table. She rinsed it out in the bathroom sink, carefully dried it, and fixed the dents as best she could. When Bo's father arrived to collect his son from the principal's office, Haven was waiting. She held out the lunchbox to the tall boy with 2 black eyes and blood caked in the corner of his mouth. He smiled at her as he took it, and Haven's heart started beating for the first time in months. Whatever he'd done, and Haven couldn't figure it out, Bo Decker was not ashamed. I love Bo. He's the bomb. Also, I can't believe those kids beat him up like that. Bullies? I hate bullies. Alright. Anyways. After that, Haven and Bo became inseparable, and her friendship with Dr. Tidmore slowly faded away. The preacher counseled Haven to keep her distance from Bo. He wasn't a good influence, Dr. Tidmore insisted, and he shared his opinion with Imogene Snively, who lectured Haven on rotten apples and bad seeds. But Haven refused to be swayed. Once she'd found Bo, she wasn't about to let him go. And she spent the next 8 years trying to convince herself that one loyal friend was all she needed. But there was still something missing, something that nagged at her, an emptiness she couldn't explain. There were mornings she woke with her heart pounding wildly and a sensation of arms wrapped around her. But the feeling slipped away the moment she opened her eyes, and no matter how quickly she squeezed them shut, she couldn't recapture the contentment she'd felt. In the 9th grade, she watched her classmates begin to pair off until she and Bo seemed the only ones left. Not that Haven didn't have her share of admirers. Throughout her sophomore year, Bradley Sutton had pursued her with a passion that was evident to all but his girlfriend, Haven's former friend, Morgan Murphy. Had Haven accepted his affection, it would have ensured her a place among the school's most popular students, but Haven had turned him down. She knew there was someone out there for her, but whoever it was, he certainly wasn't a student at Blue Mountain High School. With no social life to speak of, Haven threw herself into the business she'd launched with Bo freshman year. Sorry, keep stumbling. To their surprise and relief, it had flourished immediately. Having promised his ailing mother that he'd attend Vanderbilt University, Bo needed money for school. Haven had her own reason for working. She told Imogene she wanted to help pay for college in New York, but in truth, Haven had always suspected she'd need ready money for the day her destiny finally revealed itself. When the visions had returned, Haven had known it was almost time. She pored over her savings account and statements when they arrived in the mail, ensuring that the $12,000 escape fund she'd stashed away was still safe in the corners of the First Citizens Bank. Now, thanks to Imogene, it would stay there just a little bit longer. Gosh darn it, Imogene. That is the end of Chapter 8. Should I just go ahead and do Chapter 9? I've made the 4 of you wait long enough. I'll do Chapter 9. You did 3 chapters in one night. Chapter 9. The bedroom door creaked open and timid footsteps crossed the room. I've got something for you, Haven. Splayed across her bed with her eyes squeezed shut, Haven refused to acknowledge her guest. She didn't need to look to see her mother's stooped figure and anxious smile. It was a posture that made the best people want to protect her and the worst want to kick her. I know you're upset about school and all, but I think you might want to look at this, said Maymore, this time in a whisper. Haven opened a single eye and saw her mother clutching a shoebox to her chest. What is that? Haven threw her legs over the side of her bed and drew herself upright. Her mother sat down beside her. Her gaunt cheeks were flushed and her eyes flashed. For the first time in years, she almost looked alive. Her hands caressed the box as if it were human skin. Something Ernest did a long time ago. I brought it with us when we moved here. Your mother doesn't know about it, but I thought it was time you take a look. Goosebumps sprouted on Haven's arms. Maymore had mentioned her husband only a handful of times since the accident. Hearing his name spoken aloud was like hearing someone summon up a spirit. When Haven was younger, while her father was at work, her mother had told her countless stories. How she'd met Haven's father on his very first day in town, how they'd eloped 3 weeks later, young and poor and crazy in love, how he'd slaved 15 hours a day to earn the money to open his store. Haven hadn't found it hard to believe that the hero of all May's stories was the man with the crooked nose and the unruly thatch of curly hair who shared her home. When seen through her mother's eyes, Ernest Moore was the very picture of perfection, a fairy tale prince who had rescued May from a wicked witch with whom she had been fated to live happily ever after. The stories had stopped after Ernest Moore's death, but Haven sometimes wondered if May Moore still told them to herself late at night when she didn't think anyone could hear her crying. May Moore slid the box onto Haven's lap. Afraid at first to touch it, the girl let it sit for a moment, heavy as a granite slab. Its exterior was warped and stained, and when Haven took a look inside, she found it stuffed with paper. Scraps torn from notebooks, pieces of copy paper folded into tiny squares, words scribbled on gas station receipts. Haven reached into the box and pulled out a propane bill. Her father had used the other side to print out the draft of a letter he'd written. Haven skimmed across the paper and landed on a line halfway down the first page. Ethan's not a doll. He's real. Oh my God! Haven's eyes met her mother's. She knew in an instant how much May Moore was risking. He wrote it down, May Moore whispered. Every word you ever said. He never believed there was anything wrong with you. What about you? Haven pressed her mother. Do you think there's something wrong with me? Maymore steadied her hands, which lay clenched together in her lap. No, she admitted. I don't. And after you take a look at all that, you might not either. Haven watched silently as her mother rose and made her way to the door. I'm sorry, Haven, May said before she left. I shouldn't have kept it hidden so long. As she read through the papers, the things Haven had tried to forget began coming back to her. That is the end of chapter 9. And that is all for the night. So if you've made it to here, have a wonderful evening or morning or day, whatever time it is.